for the work session. We are not on Zoom or any public participation for work session. That will happen with the regular meeting, okay? And then it's even more important that we project because here's where they hear you. Okay, we're doing our best with that. Any questions? Yes, Mr. McCarter.
Assuming the mics are live and those speakers are broadcasting, and we tested to make certain that that unit will pick up what comes through the public address.
They will as best as possible. Those have to be muted down to avoid feedback.
Okay?
Yeah,
Ian,
so
yeah.
I'll answer that. So
Yeah.
these speakers are off, but the recording is still running. So it's just, we just turned the amp off for these chamber speakers.
Have we tested the remote mic to make
Yes.
certain that?
Yeah, everything else should be working as normal.
So this is the speaker that's picking up?
No, this will be for when people call in, yes.
Okay.
Your normal speaker does what it does during a meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're going to get started with our town board work session for Monday, March 23rd, 2020, 6:03 PM. This is a work session about, we're going to evaluate and take a look at some business assistance ideas and thoughts that came out of the call that Stacy and Shane and Paul and I were on with a bunch of other key stakeholders, bankers, some commerce, Chamber of Commerce folks that kind of drove us in this direction. And we have kind of a general idea about some sales tax revenue ideas that we want to roll. We did receive a letter from Jason Schaefer this afternoon that also has some other ideas, but I think tonight, because we have an hour and then we're going to jump into our regular meeting, let's talk about the sales tax issue, and then we have to talk about you want to talk about this ordinance too, is that correct? Yeah, the response discussion. Are we talking about the ordinance? Or is that in our regular meeting? We're just gonna,
Our regular meeting is the emergency declaration ordinance.
okay, so we can leave in that discussion for that.
That's right.
Okay.
And then, I'm sorry, I can't just turn this on and then.
Okay,
Oh, here we go. I'm sorry. We'll talk about the emergency declaration ordinance tonight at the regular meeting. One outcome I did want to discuss with the board, though, was following direction on this emergency kind of business assistance, scheduling a special meeting for later this week for the board to adopt that by ordinance. So that'll be pending board direction. An outcome that I'd like to see or recommend is that later this week, staff could put whatever direction we get from the board in an ordinance form and bring that back later this week.
okay. Yeah, so Stacy, you're gonna kick us off? We'll hear from her how we kind of got where we got, what the ideas are about rolling out the sales tax assistance. And then I think some of the ideas that you can look through in your packet later from Jason Schaefer, you just kind of take a look at those and we can continue to have those discussions, but I don't think they're as important as what we're going to be discussing right now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and town board members. In your packet, I just handed out, which will be available electronically as well after this meeting, is just a basic memo to talk about the ideas that we had for a sales tax deferral program. The town board and our leadership team have consistently heard from and received input from small business community concerning a significant economic impacts about the COVID-19 virus and this crisis. It's hitting many sectors of the business community, but primarily because the first ones out of the gate was the hospitality industry and restaurants. This is what we're focusing on for now. Doesn't mean that there can't be other ideas brought up in additional work sessions and discussions, but for now it really is hitting the restaurant industry and the bars hard. So we've come up with a program for that. We've also been exploring other ways in which the town may alleviate or mitigate the near-term cash flow concerns that business owners can meet for their most critical around their fixed expenses, such as utilities, their lease payment or mortgage payment, and taxes. So those seem to be the high priorities that we've heard about, as well as their employees and keeping staff on board. The town, we've looked at different alternatives for local action, coinciding with stimulus packages that are rapidly being developed by the federal and the state. So we've looked at all these and tried to keep tabs on what's going on for that as well. And ED staff and communications staff have been constantly working to keep the website updated and the messaging to go out as it relates to economic development, stimulus packages and information from the federal and the state level. We've also recently posted and promoted the spreadsheet of our 60-plus restaurants and bars. Jill and I and Matt from the DDA called all 60-some businesses and got their days of operation, their hours of operation, and then a link to their website and what services they're providing, and that has been posted on the website and shoved out through social media platforms. So those are ever changing, so we're hoping that, we'll try to keep that up to date. I've already updated it once today as well, so hopefully we'll just keep that up to date and provide options for the residents and other people in our community to know where they can and cannot get food or those particular services from. So, again, with the recent executive orders from the governor, it's really had an effect on our businesses and specifically the restaurants and the bars. So we've come up with an idea for to defer the sales tax collection for the entities that would fall mainly under full-service restaurants, those restaurants that don't have the ability to have drive-throughs or other capabilities and delivery services. So what we'd like to do is from a program starting in March is to defer the sales tax collection that it is due to us for a period of 4 to 6 months, then have it restart again in July, and then up to you guys how you want to structure it, but they could repay those deferred months over the rest of the 6 of the months of the rest of the year, with all of the tax payments being due by the end of 2020 and or within the first month of 2021, like how they normally are remitted for December is paid in January for the following month. So we know that this is just one idea and suggestion, but this is what our thought process were. We met with legal, Shane and I met with legal and finance department to discuss about options for this, what we could do if it's a viable program, if it's legal, can we do this? And it is something that we feel it can be done, and we hope that it would be somewhat of a small assistance to allow people to defer those sales tax payments and use those to pay their utilities or their mortgages or their lease. By all means, it's not the only thing that they can do. They can always contact their landlords and ask for deferment and payments of rents and all of those other things as well. There's a myriad of different programs out there. You'll see in your packet, I've started to collect a multi-page document for federal, state, regional, and local assistance with links to websites. This program would not prohibit any businesses from applying from the SBA disaster loan funds, because those funds are open to any and all businesses, including, the ones that have recently been announced, as well as the salons, the gyms, and everything. That loan program, we are seeking and have received assistance or offer from assistance from the small business development centers. They have counselors and people on staff that are familiar with filling out that paperwork and are really good at making sure that they check all those boxes and get all that information correct from the beginning. Because if that paperwork doesn't get filled out properly, it'll get kicked out. So I don't believe that my staff has the resources or the ability to help people fill out those forms. It's very complicated. I think they're professionals at it. They work with SBA loans and those programs all the time. So I reached out to both Larimer SBDC and the East Colorado Small Business Development Center, and they've agreed to have us send resources there. That is also on our website currently. The next link down past that, assistance available. So with that being said, I will open it up for questions and discussions to talk kind of about what you guys think about this program.
Well, and I also want everybody to know that at 1 o'clock tomorrow, I'm going to be on a call with Weld County. And I believe part of that discussion is there's going to be a discussion to see what municipalities might have, a desire or an appetite to defer property taxes as well. So I don't know what that means, but until we have that discussion tomorrow, but you should know that that's another conversation that's brewing. Miles?
I have a question. So these establishments will still collect the sales tax and use it for operating purposes for their business.
Correct.
How would they ever catch up? I'm not opposed to it. I'm just wondering, how do you catch up in July when maybe we start trying to collect again?
Yeah, I think for 2 or 3 months to be spread over 6 months or longer, I think that might help a little bit with that. It's still going to sting. I think that there's other ideas that we can do to help promote people visiting those restaurants and those services industries and those to try to keep shopping local, keep promoting that to try to help maybe increase some of those sales this summer. I think you'll see some of those ideas.
Would it help just to waive the sales tax, and then the residents aren't paying and they're not collecting and filing and trying to catch up later?
Well, I think the part of it was to use that resource, that extra 3.95% coming in, to be able to use that to help pay for some of their utilities. If the residents aren't paying it, then they don't have that extra money
Yeah.
instead of remitting it to us.
I'm just worried about them getting in a bigger hole. That's,
I understand. I just don't know until we look at, we don't know how long this is going to last.
oh, yeah.
And we don't know, obviously, how many businesses it's going to affect. And I don't know if the town, I just don't think it's economically viable for the town to just even
Well,
forego
then we're playing
it.
catch-up, too.
Yeah.
Then we'll have to play catch-up, but I think Shane has,
Yeah, Mr. Baker, I'd just add that right now, they've already collected like for March.
Right.
And that would be due a month from now. So right now, that's just a part of their current cash receipts. So I think the idea, again, like Ms. Miller said, is, they've got a little bit less cash. Instead of writing us a check, they could hold on to it. And again, I think that as we structured it now, we had a long discussion of how many months are appropriate, because I think that we have the current shutdown, but once they reopen, I think we have that recognition that they're going to need to get some cash flow going again, right? That's going to take 90 days for them to get that cash flow back. So I think right now what we're trying to do is structure something, and then if we get 3 months, 4 months down the road and it turns out, look, they need more time than that, they need this, I think the board, the staff will have a little bit better, clearer picture of how to help them, and I think the board could reconsider it. So right now it's just, I believe whatever we do is going to probably, the board in 3 or 4 months will say, it wasn't exactly right, let's do this or that. But it's hard to guess it right now.
Yeah.
because we had talked about deferring till July. That gives them about 6 months. But we also feel it's important that we have a good, solid plan in place, because this board is going to change, and the next, and so we want something pretty solidified that folks know they can count on, at least for the next 6 months before something is changing.
Couple questions for Stacy. With the federal and state business assistance programs coming out, the word I've heard is they're trying to do that quickly. I don't know what quickly means. So if I were a small business and I applied for an SBA loan today, if that's even possible, what might that cover, and how soon might I get that resource? And the reason I'm asking is that has implication for me on how long we might defer our sales tax if they're getting help from some other fund.
Right, so I did sit in on a meeting last week to learn about the SBA program and how to fill out the forms. It's there. I realized I did not have the capability to do that. It's going to take 90 days before it checks out the door. Same, similar.
What about, though, the upstate? He seemed to think that there's quicker money there.
So upstate Colorado is looking at doing 2 different programs, but they have not been approved yet. Those programs include switching over the Weld-Larimer Revolving Loan Fund to be an operating loan fund instead of just for specific, so more of a working capital, helping to pay utilities and those things instead of a loan for securing or gap financing, or a loan for securing a physical structure or equipment. So they're looking at those. I don't believe that's been approved yet. I think Rich would have let us know. They're looking at that. The second thing that they're looking at doing is an enterprise zone project, meaning some companies who aren't affected and or who would have the ability to donate to that project, those cash infusements could then go out to the businesses that were hurting, and then the people that donated could have a tax income, they would have a basically a tax rebate, or their tax income liability would be reduced by how much they ever donated. So those are 2 programs that the county is working on, but they have not been approved yet at this time.
But that money would come quicker. Do you remember?
It would come quicker. I think.
I left my notes at home. I can't remember what the time frame was, but it was much shorter than 90 days.
Right. I think
believe,
Rich's
wasn't it,
goal
Shane?
was.
Do you remember?
Yeah, Mayor, I think he just said that they were going to get some clarification the next day. I don't remember him giving us a specific time frame. He just said that he hoped to get clarification in the next day or 2. Since we haven't heard from Rich, I'm guessing we don't have that clarification yet.
We do not.
Okay.
It has not been announced, either one of those programs.
And then as a second part of your question, Mr. Bennett, I think that some of these SBA loans are talking about doing, it'd be at an interest rate like 3.75, in a payback up to 30 years. So the payback is a very long time, but it is an interest-bearing account. So I think when we talk about these things, we need to look at, and we've talked about this many times, you know, the town isn't going to be the only source here, right? Like, we need the state to come in, we need the feds to come in, maybe the counties and other agencies in the community to all come together on this. So I think they all hit different parts of the capital stack for the businesses. So really, this program is supposed to just be immediate. Don't send us money. You're collecting a little bit of money from town, hold it in abeyance. But I think we're trying to hit a different solution than like an SBA loan would try to hit.
It'll be the quickest impact for the companies.
Somebody, okay. Dr. Jones, did you have some questions or some comments?
Well, it looks like what they're asking here is a deferment until they reopen, but then a waiver after they reopen. So they want to do away with the tax, sales tax, after they reopen for, I think, 30, 60, 90-day option. Is that something?
That is not the program that,
That's not what
the
we've been
program
looking
that
at.
we're
I
suggesting.
know,
That
but
was.
that's what they're.
That was a request. So this came in just today. The program that we've worked on has been something we've been working on since last week. So we just saw that today, so it's not part of the request at this time. However, if the entire board would choose to want to do that, that is at your discretion. I don't know that any other municipality is doing at that. I do know there are several other municipalities that are looking at doing this program. And I was reading on, I've been looking from coast to coast to research programs that are there to help. Chicago, even the whole state of Illinois is doing a deferment. They're not doing a waiver of taxes. So even the state, large other states on the east and west coast are not doing a waiver of sales tax or a forgiveness, like saying you can just keep it and not remit it to the municipality or the governing agency. So I think we've looked at all those things. It's not that we couldn't do that. I think that that would be at your discretion, but I know that it's not the norm and it's not what I'm recommending tonight.
Okay, has Dean looked at, I don't know, you said this is new, so he probably hasn't had a chance, but could he calculate the historical tax from these businesses just to see what we'd be impacted with?
Do you want to give those numbers that
Sure,
we
sure.
already had them look
So
at?
we did a look back from last year, and I just looked at January, February, half of March, because I just try to get, because really basically midway through March, the totals are going to be far different, so we couldn't run a number from that. So looking at those 3 months, 2.5 months, it'd be about $300,000. So it's, a little bit more than $100,000 per month. But the other thing that I don't know is, for example, some of those places in that number included places with established drive-throughs. So I don't know if they would count, at least in the program we've discussed, that those wouldn't be eligible. But there are other places that weren't in business a year ago. So like the Cacciatore, Doug City Diner, none of those places that would qualify weren't in. So I think it's fair to say that this is probably $110,000, $120,000 per month decision by the board based on historic figures. But as we move forward again, I think after March 17th, it's, I think these folks are likely to be at 20% of their historic totals.
Mr. Sisolak, David?
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. A couple of quick comments. Mr. Bennett, you were asking about federal assistance, and I think you and I had a conversation. The bill in the Senate, U.S. Congress right now in the Senate would have granted rather rapid small business loans, except to the extent those loan funds were used to pay salaries and mortgages or rent, those funds, the repayment of that would be forgiven. So it really turns into, they're calling it a grant, really, within the loan. Unfortunately, that bill, which was moving along nicely, got frozen with a filibuster on Friday. They're looking at it again over the weekend, but meanwhile, the House is trying to develop theirs. If they pass one as well, obviously it'll go to conference and we'll never get this done. So I hope though, within 60 days, there is an avenue for federal funding assistance on small businesses. Maybe that reduces our need to cover a period of time. So as soon as that kicks in, we can cease. I like the idea, absolutely like the idea. I question, and I know you just got this, but he's also asking about, in essence, rebating the March payment, the March 20 payment for those that paid it. Have we A, considered that, or B, can we do that?
So that's definitely something that the board can consider, again, from staff, and again, we talked with the mayor last week after the saying, we just discussed, okay, how could this program look? Obviously, the board, if the board said, because the March 20th payment was for February sales tax. So if the board said, geez, we want to rebate that to businesses that qualify, we could send those checks back out to them. We absolutely could.
We could do that.
Yes.
But in lieu of that, originally, we were only talking about maybe doing a deferral of 3 months. And so instead of having to make our team work now to make those rebates, that's when we talked about, well, let's make a longer deferral on the end to make up for that payment.
Yeah, I don't have a problem doing both if it works. I guess, Ian, maybe there's a bit of analysis, if we look at this from kind of the cold financial aspects of this, if we defer these payments till later in the year, June, July, August, and those businesses fail, we're simply going to be a creditor in bankruptcy along with everybody else. So we are playing with taxpayer dollars in that.
Yeah, we are.
In that risk of getting repaid. Now, to save our downtown businesses, I'm okay with that risk, but it is something we should all consider about what's the likelihood of successfully claiming refunds
Right.
in that.
But in the end, I think we all have to be prepared. It may not save them anyway.
I agree as well. I'm on board with doing this. I think if we start talking about, if things get worse, we're talking about waivers. That's a whole nother discussion, but what we're looking at right now as far as deferments, I'm on board. And I agree with the risk, because that's probably the only heartburn that I had. And hopefully we're in a situation where, we save a heck of a lot more than we lose. But I think it is the right thing to do for our businesses, our community.
Ken?
Yeah, there's a risk in anything we do. And the more businesses we lose long-term, that's a bigger risk than, I agree with Mr. Solosky that, we're taking a risk with taxpayer dollars that we may not see it come back. But if we can help some of our businesses stay existing over the next year or two, that's better, that's a less risk than letting a lot of businesses go under. What I'm struggling with is trying to understand the criteria by which we would allow a business to defer their sales tax without us getting into business of picking winners and losers in business. And I know, Mr. Hill, you've talked about maybe a large grocery store, they're going to continue doing well. They probably don't need it. So I think we need to write that criteria very carefully so that we can justify why you can and you can't.
Right, and Mr. Bennett, if I can, so we've talked about kind of the bookends of this program and who would qualify and who wouldn't. Like Ms. Miller mentioned before, really our target is our primary dining restaurants, also bars, breweries, and coffee houses. So if it has a primary drive-in, and I don't want to name any business, so think of a place that relies a lot on a drive-through, then they wouldn't qualify. If they are primarily takeout, so there's businesses that you just show up and you get what they prepared and you leave, then they wouldn't qualify. So it's basically any place that doesn't have a drive-through that's built in or whose business model doesn't rely on carryout. So it'd be all those restaurants, coffee places, and breweries that fall into that. And I guess all the breweries would fall into that right away. You can't do drive-through there. So that would be it, and so it would be targeted specifically to them. It would just be, basically, it'd be an opt-in where we wouldn't automatically say they're in the program. I think we would notice them. We would send them a letter and say, your business fits this criteria. If you'd like to opt in, please return this attached application. And when I say application, we're talking a one-page, quick check the box, fill it out, and send it back. It'll be something that they could do in 5 minutes. So,
Can we make it so it's even online? You think?
Yeah, I think so.
We would have that capability, or?
Well, and we can. I just want to make sure that once we've identified the businesses that really qualify for the program, I want to make sure we let them know specifically. I don't want to rely on them hearing about it or questioning. So I want to go out and grab them and say, you qualify.
Oh, yeah, no, I like the letter going out, but I mean, for them to respond, it'd be better, can we make that response where they just can go online to do it rather than
Yeah, there
have
should
to-
be a way to do a
Yeah,
fillable PDF.
I'm sure we can. I mean, I'm
We can do a
speaking for
fillable.
IT, but yeah.
Okay. Okay, anything else? Okay, Mr. Baker had something, and then David.
Well, yeah, Mr. Sazowski brings up a good point. This is taxpayer money. there's gonna be a lot of taxpayers struggling out there too.
Yep.
And, again, I don't know if maybe we just waive our sales tax for a month, but if, that might encourage people to go shopping. And I'm not sure this is big enough to even save a lot of these. I'm really worried, but, I wanna do something. So if this is what we decide on, let's do it. I'm all in. But the other thing, Mr. Hale, I'm concerned about, you know, just because someone has a takeout focused business or a drive-through, oh, I'm sorry, were you saying if someone like I'm thinking of a pizza place that you go in and pick it up and that's it, would they be eligible?
What we're suggesting is no, like, because if you're, again, if that's been your entire business is takeout, you haven't been impacted by the governor's shutdown or anything happening in the county. I mean, at least as far as mandated. Same thing with the drive-through. If you've been by any business that has an established drive-through, anything, it seems like they're busier than they have been. So this is really targeting to the specific restaurants that have been impacted by the closure. So again, you know, the board, we could set this up however you want. This is just kind of how staff is suggesting we structure it. If you felt more like, geez, let's not be that selective, let's open it up, it's your purse string, so we can certainly do it however you want.
What about, like, national corporations? I guess they're owned by a franchise, a local franchisee, so,
The majority of them are a local franchisee owner. Yeah. Specifically in Windsor too,
Yeah.
just because we've got our homegrown,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, David?
You first.
Thanks. God, I'm Greco-Roman wrestling inside my head, because I think when you start trying to define who's capable,
Yeah.
who gets the ability to defer, who doesn't. You know, on the other hand, we're talking about $300,000 at least to date, based on a mid-March kind of number. But we can bet that it's almost going to be self-selecting. Businesses who are in fact relying on sit-down customers are not going to have any sales between the middle of March and we don't even know when. So by definition, if they pay any sales tax at all, it's going to be a very small number. So deferring that small number may be meaningless to them. Whereas those businesses that are drive-through and are able to continue conducting business, have the cash flow, will have larger sales tax bills, but then they have the business continuing due to the nature of their business design. So now I'm convincing myself the closing of these businesses, almost by definition, is limiting their financial exposure to sales tax. So what, in fact, would we be deferring? It's $300,000 as of now, but in fact, the April 20th bill was probably going to be a tenth of that. So anyway, I just throwing that out is.
But it is one of the things too that if you read the letter we got, that
Yeah.
they're also, so obviously there are some businesses who believe that that would help them.
Yeah, well.
In going back to February, you mean? in
Well,
renovating
I
February?
think just in deferring. I mean, of course, the folks who wrote the letter, they want lots of things to happen. I think the decision we have to make is what's practical, what's, you know, what can we do, what can't we do, and again, with regards to the taxpayer, because at the end of the day, it is the taxpayer who's paying for all of this. Paul?
Well, going off of similar to what Mr. Kozlowski was saying, my concern is that this is such a little Band-Aid to a gushing wound. We all see what the wound is, but like what Mr. Kozlowski said, that was kind of what my thought was going to boil down to, which is if 10% of their business is now going to be what they're doing through takeout, we're talking about reimbursing them a couple $100 a day or something maybe. To me, it doesn't seem like this is going to get, whether it's coming from the taxpayer, whether we're all generous or not, that's not the point here. I guess my point is I understand that that's what they thought would be a great idea. I just don't know how this is really getting them to keep their doors open. And so in the end, is the taxpayer just going to lose out on this money because we meant with the best of intention to help them out, but in the end, it still didn't amount to anything to keep their doors open.
Well, but I also think that it shows, I mean, you have to look at how they're looking at it, though. It shows that at least we're making an effort, and we're coming up with a proposal for them. I mean, because some of this onus and some of what is happening, it's on the business owner, too.
Sure.
And how well they were or are not prepared for any kind of emergency within their business.
I agree that it's better than nothing. I'm just saying, I think in the end, we come back. I'm not saying that we don't do it. I'm just simply putting it out there, like what Mr. Kozlowski was saying. I think that this is not gonna be a $300,000 decision. I think this is gonna be a lot less.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be.
And in the end, where did it get us? I mean, we tried to help, and hopefully it works, but we're all very cautiously optimistic.
Okay,
Yeah, we all want to do
Miles?
something for sure. I wonder if a property tax, did we look at property tax? That just seems like,
but we can't do that on our own. We can't make that decision.
Okay.
That's
No.
why it has to go.
Right, yeah, so, the Weld County, the second payment is due, and so, they collect taxes for the fire district, the school district, the DDA, the town, and these special districts, so most of the time, the town's 12 mills is, in order of magnitude, maybe 10% of the total property tax bill.
good point.
So, like the mayor said, tomorrow we're going to participate in a phone call with Weld County. I think they're going to talk to see what the appetite is for deferring that for a while. So I'd certainly like to hear the board's discussion about that. But again, for our deferral, it's a small part of the pie. And I don't think like the school district, the fire district, I mean, that's basically 100%
That's all
of
they
the
got.
revenue. So I certainly wouldn't say that they would be willing to do that, because it would probably mean they have to shut down operations to do that.
I'm just, well, we could even rebate last half,
Yeah,
the town's portion.
These are all things I think that the board can look at with future decisions. So I think the board could say, hey, look, for all these affected businesses, we've collected the property tax, staff run the numbers per business and let us know what that would be to refund some of that. I mean, we can set this up however you determine. But, I think part of this too, and I think it's to the earlier conversations, is, we need to see a broader effort. We need to see a countywide, a statewide, a federal effort, because the town just simply doesn't have the resources
Right.
to do it all.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah,
that's.
and just as a reminder, I think Stacy read it, but remember, we've only, it's not like this has been going on for 3 months. This all just hit us last Tuesday. So in reality, for most of the businesses, it's not even been a week yet. So this is certainly going to be, and we don't know how long it's going to go, and that's the other thing. So certainly, we want to be responsive. They were appreciative of the conversation we had with them. They're appreciative that I'm talking about the business folks that we're having this conversation tonight. But I think we have to think about it in terms of, this is going to be a long, phased-out plan, depending on how long this goes on. So we don't want to come up, we want to be ready and prepared and have ideas in place, but it doesn't mean we have to issue everything tonight and be ready to do everything tonight. I think we need to start putting together what it's going to take, because we don't know what we're going to come back to. It's all going to depend on how long it goes, and how much more restrictions are yet to be put in place or not. Ken?
I think all of us are probably feeling some frustration that we would like to do more, because that's our nature, is to do something when you're faced with a problem. And I agree with Mr. Minnemeyer, the tax deferment probably isn't a whole lot. And Mr. Kozlowski's right, it's probably going to reduce over the months. But I see it as a little bit of a stopgap measure. If it's going to take 90 days at least to get any type of other help, this might help them make their lease payment at least, or something. So every little bit, I think, is going to help our businesses. The other thing on the sales tax, we got to remember that we are responsible for maintaining public services as well. And that sales tax isn't like extra money just hanging around. We still need to maintain services throughout our community for the next year or so. That might even become more important. So I think this a stopgap measure, deferring sales tax for 3-4 months, whatever, makes a lot of sense. Even though it's not enough, but that buys them some time to figure out what else might be available.
I think it's step one. And I think as we move forward, we'll look for other tools in the toolbox to be able to bring back to you to say, this is what your other options are. I did hear actually that Larimer County has deferred tax collections that are due now for property taxes to April 15th, I believe. They pushed it back, but the other second half payment is due in July. I saw something came through the wire today on that, but I have not verified it, so.
Well, I also heard there's going to be maybe a federal tax pay waiver for employers coming as well. Mr. Hale?
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to add again, so it really is conjecture, and it's hard for us to know in the future how much the sales tax waivers will amount to. But like the mayor said, so we've been into this for a week. We don't know how long the shutdown will be, right? So let's say everybody can open up April 15th. I don't know that, but in that case, it will have been 1 month where they're not operating. They'd still have half of April, they'd have May and June, a time again when we're deferring those tax collections so they can get the cash flow back. So again, it's hard to know how much that's gonna be, and that really is dependent on how long this closure actually is. And so it's just, right now, it's, again, we've worked, I mean, everything that I knew was true 1 week ago is not true any longer, right? So we're all trying to react and try to do our best with this information, but, and again, if the board wants to structure it a different way, that's why we're having the discussion, and that's why we don't have a draft ordinance for you, because, we really wanted to get your input on how you wanted to structure it.
Yep. Okay, Miles and then David.
Conceptually, would this strictly be for food establishments? I mean, does it expand to other retail establishments? You mentioned hair places or nails or...
Right, so right now, we have not begun to understand the impact from them. Our typical hair salons and other service-oriented industries do not typically generate a lot of sales tax revenue. Hair salons may sell some shampoo and those kind of things. We haven't begun to see the impacts from those. But the service-oriented, it's difficult. What do we do? Because gyms, right? The gyms had to close down, but they don't sell a lot of merchandise or anything like that to actually have a taxable source. So the only other option may be something that comes along in the form of Weld or Larimer and actually deferring property tax payments. At this point, I've been encouraging everybody and anybody to go fill out the SBA Disaster Assistance Program because they don't have to accept it, even if they're approved. But it is a process that takes about 3 weeks once you submit your application for you to hear back, and then about up to 90 days to get money for it. So even if they hear back and they may not know, and they don't have to accept the loan,
Right.
but it is 3.75 for for-profits and 2.75 for nonprofits for up to 30 years. So right now, it's the only other resource that we have outside of some potential ones from Weld County right now that we have access to, that we keep continuing to push. And I talked to a chiropractor today, and I told them the same thing. Just go fill it out. You don't have to take the money, but at least it's such a process to get in and get through. Go fill it out. And the employees as well, too. Go file for unemployment if you had to lay people off, or go look at that. I've been referring people to the workforce centers that have all the rules and regulations for if they have to pay for certain people, or if they have part-time employees versus full-time employees versus, what can they do for their staff as well. So it does actually affect some of those places that had to close, the hair salons or their employees as well.
I was just trying to think of all the other places that
Yeah.
can't have.
We'd have to run some numbers and some sales tax numbers, but I don't know if they're closed and mandated to stay closed, they can't be generating any sales tax. So unless they start shifting everything to online, and I don't know unless they have an online presence already, how we help them with that, but it's something we could look into.
Okay. David?
Thank you, Mayor. I was curious, because I did mention that Jason had asked about that rebate of the March 20th, and I'm not sure I got a feel for how the board feels about rebating collected funds. Certainly, I think we're reaching agreement in terms of deferment of going forward for probably 90 days of sales
I'd like to defer it till July 15th,
till July, July 20, whatever.
or July 20th. I mean, I think, again, it could be a phase thing, we go in, but I think you gotta have some kind of a longer plan.
So July 20th would be through June receipts. So
Right.
let's just talk like how many months the board would like to defer, and then we can put a number to that. But July
Yeah.
20th remittance would be through June receipts.
So, and I like the idea of it being no interest. So they're repaying whatever they deferred over the balance of the year. I'm guessing we can't carry that liability, if you will, over into the next fiscal year. So they'd have to pay it back in full by the end of the year? Question mark?
So I think we could defer it into a future year. It's a revenue source and not a fiscal commitment. So I think we could, if you wanted to, defer it into future years. the no interest, the idea of no interest is okay if it's paid on time. We would defer penalties and interest that are ordinarily collectible under the code. But if it's not paid on time, then that also follows and answers one of the questions somebody raised, which is, what's the incentive if they're gonna go, if the business might go under, we get in line with the bankruptcy court, the incentive would be, if you don't pay it, it becomes a much bigger number with interest and penalties. So I just want to make certain we're clear that what we're talking about, thank you, that what we're talking about is deferral to some date certain, and then it's all paid in full. But if not, the penalties and interest, we have to address that in some way. And I'm not coaching in one direction or another, but my assumption would be that if somebody takes advantage of the deferral and doesn't pay on time, that all the interest and penalties would apply as if we hadn't deferred it.
So what it sounds like is we'd probably say whatever deferred balance there is as of June 1 or July 1 is due in equal payments each month over the remaining calendar year, because that'll set the amount due and the due date. And if it's not paid on that date, then you pick up the deferral and interest.
Right, so practically speaking, I think, again, if the board was supportive through June, we would say July collections are due August 20th, like they always would be. So starting July 1st and forward, your normal collections are remitted back to the town. The remainder of that balance, whether it's in equal payments or we just say you have until December 31st of 2020 to make the town whole, that's, again, I think some places may get their cash flow going a little bit quicker and they may be able to quicker respond. Other places may want to defer more and start making bigger payments in October, November. So I don't know how much we want to structure that, but I just think it would basically state they have until this date to make us whole, and starting on whatever date the board sets, they need to get back on time at least with that particular month.
Well, I think probably, I mean, the only way this is going to really work to the business's benefit is if they get reopened April 15th, May 15th. I mean, if we defer them until August and this thing goes on, they're shut down until July 15th, they're going to be gone under completely, or they'll be definitely underwater. So, and with what Dave and Paul said, I mean, it's, Shane gave us the really good time numbers for this first 3 months or whatever. And I agree with you, if they do 10%, the dine-in places start doing a lot of carry-out, it would still probably be just a fraction of what they do normally. So we're not at a whole lot of risk there as far as what we defer. But I think they're going to have to get back operating within maybe 60 days to be significant.
Right. Well, and I think you're right, Dr. Jones. I think that if this drags on for 45, 60 days, I don't think there's anything the town can do, quite frankly. I don't know any restaurant that could really sustain that long of a shutdown.
It's a different discussion. It's a whole different discussion.
And two, I think right now this ordinance and this recommendation is based on what we know now. I think if circumstances change, and we know that as a collective group, circumstances have changed, we're going to probably come back, and I'm almost certain this is not the first discussion this kind to have with the board on this matter. Well, it's not going to be the last. I'm sure we're going to have multiple.
Right. I mean, and I think along with this, if you see some of the requests in Jason's letter about how we could make the curbside pickup or delivery easier, withdrawing some of the current, I think, restrictions, I think any of those kinds of things that we can do to make it helpful to make businesses be able to be, I guess, more able to do pickup or delivery easier. I think,
Yeah, I think so.
I would certainly, and I would think, from what I'm hearing, everybody would be agreeable to try to lift whatever restrictions we needed to for that.
Right, Mary? Yeah, I think he mentioned like using our sign code,
Right.
The pickup delivery stuff. I think he mentioned even coming out of this, maybe the town could free up some marketing funds when we get restarted and help promote them. I think he talked about using the signage at the entrances. I don't know that we could just single one business out and say, you know, go to this place tonight. But I think we could certainly use that messaging to really promote our downtown business community. So I think there's a lot of things we could do in there that wouldn't be that hard, that we could put out right away.
Yeah, so I think that those things in tandem with this could be something that could at least signify that we have heard them and we're trying to do something. And again, this is a starting point until we know what we really are dealing with here.
Correct.
Sorry, and the only reason, Shane, I was kind of pinning it down in my head because you mentioned getting a rather simple application form, as simple as you could make it. But of course, the question is, for what am I applying? And that's where you've got to flesh out the details of what this deferral program looks like. And obviously let you people noodle through on that, but it is going to be like, okay, well, when is it due? And how is it due, et cetera. But I think sooner the better. I mean, if we're,
Right.
we got to do this.
And what about the criteria that is everybody, I mean, you kind of questioned that, so I don't know, do we want to change anything about that current criteria that's being looked at, or what is being thought about in terms of who would be able to receive this?
Yes, and I'm struggling with just because you had a carry-out focused business, they're still gonna be dramatically impacted. But I get what you're saying, like, we have to draw that line somewhere. So,
I guess sorry.
Yep.
I guess I would propose that Shane and his team kind of work with the people that wrote this and kind of jointly discuss what this could look like. And I realize there's a small group of businesses here, but I think what I'm feeling is the small business community in Windsor is a team. They're all kind of supportive of each other. So they will have more visibility, better visibility as to who's being impacted and how than we may sitting here. So maybe work with them to develop the criteria and the terms and come back to us. And say,
Well, but we could, but most of those folks that you're looking at there, they're all going to be able to be part of this. They weren't really part of this other discussion. So I don't know that they would be the right team to help us develop the criteria because well, I think most of those folks represent downtown, and downtown's important. We have other businesses besides just in downtown that we need to look out for, right? Too. And so I think the criteria really should come from, basically first the board kind of sets whatever the parameters you want, but then it can go back to Stacy and Shane, and I could be part of that conversation too, where we go in and and I'm sure we'll need our attorney, maybe, drafted up the language or what the criteria is, but we just in general want to get it from you, because we will continue, I'm sure, to have continued conversation with some of these key business stakeholders and let them know, here's what we're rolling out, here's what we're doing, and continue to have conversation to listen from them as week after week goes by, what else is happening and how else we might be able to help them. Miles?
so when this gets drafted, could you maybe give us some examples of who will or won't? Because I'm thinking there's all sorts of little restaurants down by the King Super Shopping Center, both sides of 392, who are carry-out kind of businesses, sandwich shops or pizza, whatever it is, juice shops. Like, how do they? I guess it would just give me a better idea if I knew more specific.
Like who was or wasn't included? Is that kind
Yeah.
of what you maybe are thinking?
Yeah, and again, I don't feel comfortable on the record and on camera saying I think these people would qualify or these people wouldn't. I'd be happy offline to kind of send an example list to the board of, again, pending your direction on what you want to see. We could let you know under this, these businesses would qualify, these would not. And then if you looked at it and said, geez, that's not at all what I had in mind, let us know.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay.
Yeah, because we're not going to be able to make that decision tonight anyway. I mean,
Right.
we'll have to draft an ordinance. Will be by ordinance?
Yes.
So we'll have to draft an ordinance, and I think there'll be time and hold a special meeting online with all of us where we'll all come back, and there'll be a time to maybe be presented with that kind of information beforehand. So if you had questions or you wanted to modify, I guess, some of that criteria at that time to include something that you're not seeing, you'd be able to do that before we actually, voted.
Because I wonder if the criteria could focus on the size of their business. If we're trying to help small businesses,
Yeah,
maybe we look at.
we talked about square footage, that was a part of our
Or
earlier
sales.
discussion, but that's harder for us to parcel out. For example, I'll just say like the Mill, I mean, you have Cacciatore, you have the Mill Tavern. They're in a very large building, but they're clearly small businesses that are in there. Again, that makes it a little bit harder. Let us just send you the list of who we think would qualify and who wouldn't. And the board can look at that and say, yeah, we think that this is what we had in mind, or why on earth wouldn't these guys qualify?
Okay. And
Okay.
I have another question. Just
Sure.
on the timeframe, why are you thinking for like June, for business certainty or?
Well, again, yes. I mean, again, I think it shows that we're really trying to, for business certainty on their end, and because this board is changing in like
Yeah.
30 days. And again, the board at any time could go, I mean, if this thing ends and things are going merrily along and then we don't need that, the board could certainly come back, I guess, and change something in midstream.
Because I think
But-
that would be an argument for a shorter term, is it allows flexibility in something that we do. If things change in the middle of April, do we want to continue with this program?
Yeah, but I'm just talking about, if I'm a business person right now, they're re-looking at their budgets, they're re-looking at how they're looking at things. And so if we say, if that's one of the plans, here's how much time we might give them, that would be something they could readjust with that in mind as they're rethinking this.
Okay.
Paul?
Two things, and I wanted to ask Ms. Miller this question, which is, I know that there's even certain businesses that were listed on this list that have indicated on their front door that they're not opening until further notice at all. Does that play into whether they would qualify, whether they would be included with an potential ordinance that would be drawn up? Meaning they're not opening their doors, they don't necessarily obviously need to be waiving or having a sales tax, holiday or deferral. But that's question one. The second question is when it comes to, Mr. Hale wanted to know thoughts and feelings with the property tax side of things. A lot of the businesses that we're talking about don't necessarily own their space, so therefore, if it came to the county, et cetera, saying, hey, that there's a property tax deferral on that as well, it would be up to the landlord, waiving maybe rent on account of their sales, or their property tax being deferred as well. I don't know if that's gonna have, unless the property owner is going to help, in essence, the tenant to be able to defer rent, et cetera, because they're seeing a break from the county. Do we know anything more about that side of things, as far as, I know now we're getting into it deep, and obviously we have lots of different, property owners on Main Street, et cetera, in town, but I guess that's my question is where this is headed. Again, if it doesn't get back down to the bottom line, the business that's paying the rent, that's trying to, keep their doors open or reopen again when this turns the corner, where do we end up?
So I guess I would say for the standpoint of the businesses that have already closed, you're correct, they're not collecting any sales tax. That would maybe have an impact if you decided to rebate the February taxes that they paid on March 20th, that maybe if that chunk of money that they've paid would be able to allow them to reopen their doors and continue on, that's an unknown
Right?
for
Well,
specific.
And the second thing is how quickly they reopen, right? So they're closed right now, but
Right.
if they open April 15th, then that deferment would help them get their cash flow going.
Well, and maybe that's on a case-by-case basis, but maybe this doesn't even allow that business, knowing that this sales tax would be refunded, what they already paid in or going forward, would that change whether some of these businesses even open their doors back up out of?
I don't have that answer, but I don't think it would necessarily hurt to offer it to the handful that have closed.
I agree. I guess I'm just trying to get your pulse on what some
right.
of these businesses have been discussing.
I don't know. So when we called every business, I spoke to over 30 businesses out of the 60 myself, and they were glad that someone from the town was actually reaching out to them. They were so elated that we cared enough to reach out to them, that we were going to promote them on our social media, and they were really happy. And most of the drive-through places were reporting that they were doing fantastic. So it was the other businesses that had not that were the sit-down restaurants, more of those things that had lost a significant amount of revenue. So from that standpoint, again, I don't know if it would help, but I've only heard of 2 or 3 businesses that have closed right now because of that. I also think your question about property tax, you're right, that's a private negotiation between a landlord and a tenant. I would think in my mind, if I wanted to keep my tenant long-term and wanted to maintain that revenue coming in, that they would try to find a way to help them by reducing their overhead in the form of maybe an abatement of their rent. However, again, at the end of the day, that landlord has bills that he has to pay and mortgages on his building. So I don't know whether, again, another deferment would help, and then that would be, if they do go under another creditor, they would.
Well, maybe that's kind of a question or a comment for the mayor when she's on that phone call tomorrow, but, you know, it brings up that tenant-landlord relationship.
Yep.
And this is all optional. I mean, someone, if they want to continue paying, or pay
Sure.
half of it, or
Correct.
whatever they think they can afford to keep paying.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Right. So I guess I'm hearing that everybody is in for the deferral program. Are you in for it for to the July period? Is that
Through June.
June or June?
So that
I mean,
means-
June,
July
but I
filing.
guess
June or July, yeah, it's
It's-
a good time to check in
it's
after a
June
few
and then-
months, yeah.
So they
Through
wouldn't,
June, this would affect the July
July,
20th.
right.
Or thereabout.
correct.
well, if you did it, that would mean they wouldn't have to pay March, April, or May.
Or June.
Well, if June is due on July 20th, and that's when you reinstate it.
Right, well, if it's through June, I guess, is it through June or is it through
May.
May? If it's through June, then basically they wouldn't have their first sales tax payment until
Yeah.
August 20th.
Through June is basically 90 days out from when we would be authorized.
I'd rather do through
Yeah.
June and not have to do any rebate of checks. Because there were so many businesses who didn't even turn in their, I don't know, we don't know how many, but I'm sure there's some who didn't pay on Friday. And they're gonna, I mean, and I would guess that those that didn't pay, we're not gonna do any penalties or,
Well, and that could be part of the ordinance right now. I think the board could say, you know, don't assess any penalties from this date
Right.
forward and let them get caught up. So we could certainly structure that in the ordinance.
And we are
It's
asking.
90 days.
yeah, well, so then you'd be more.
March, April, May filing, then June file, or? If we put it off till July, then that's a 4-month.
Right, I think the goal was, we don't know how long they're going to be
We don't
closed.
know.
We know for March to April that they're not going to be really making much revenue. So I think the goal from Shane's idea and suggestion was May and June, when they start getting money back in again, that will help them recover a
Right.
little
Well, and
bit.
by the time we have the emergency ordinance written up, it would be 90 days out from that, would be the end of June.
Well, so really, I think the logic was, we were assuming 30-day business closure and 90 days to get their cash flow going again, so that's why the 120 days.
Okay, got it.
And then, Mr. Rennemeyer, so our intent is to draft an ordinance tomorrow, to send this out to the board tomorrow,
Yep,
and to ask you your pleasure on whether or not we could have a special meeting either Wednesday or Thursday.
yep.
It doesn't need to be here in person. I think, you know, because a lot of us are working from home or in close contact, I think we could even have a special meeting at 4 PM or something, or we just Zoom into a meeting. We could review the ordinance, the board could give staff your feedback and vote remotely from that. So this is something that we'd like to get out right away. I think the business community needs an answer soon.
At least by the end of this week.
Yep, yep.
Absolutely. Yep. David?
Sorry, just one last comment. I hadn't thought about the March 20th due date, and we're saying some people hadn't even paid it yet. Well, you know, what do we just saw? Too bad for those who were timely and paid it. So those who didn't pay it on time are now managing to keep their cash, whereas those who paid it on time, too bad for them. So I go back to thinking about that rebate as part of the program.
But they're gonna owe it back to us anyway. It's not like it's being dismissed.
Just a little less.
So they're gonna have to I mean, if they've paid it now, they're gonna have to come up with it.
But it's
6 months from
cash
now.
flowing for them, and I'm guessing the cash flow right now is difficult, and what we're hoping, of course, is come June, July, August, it won't be. So,
Could somebody allow,
plus
Could it be
those who-
written on a case-by-case basis?
Maybe
if
they could
needed
apply for it.
Refunded?
let them apply somehow?
I'm just bothered that those who didn't pay it on time, in fact, are gonna get a windfall.
Yeah.
Those
Well,
who
but
paid
those,
it-
there's several who maybe didn't pay on time who have, I mean, that was something evident that probably was happening even before this crisis, too.
Yeah,
I would allow them to maybe apply for a rebate, because you're making a great point,
Yeah.
that they're being punished for doing their timely filing. Conversely, they probably had the money from February sales to make the
Sure,
payment.
Sure they did. But again, cash flow for all of them is critical.
I agree.
And
And they could apply for a
I
rebate.
think, we'll see it when you draft it, but I will probably come back and say, why don't we?
Well, and again, I'd like to hear from the board, because what I'd like to do is propose it later this week and
Right.
do it kind of
Be done.
emergency ordinance. So if a majority of the board says, geez, we want to see X, Y, or Z, let us know that now, because I'd rather just build that into the ordinance. Otherwise, we could just send you the draft, and then it's kind of, you guys email them back one at a time, and one, so if the board has strong feelings about that now, I think, please express that.
Well, I guess to my mind, either you go back to collect the March 20 from those who didn't pay with the interest and overdue, or you relieve those who paid it in some fashion. Either you're going to apply the rule to everybody as to March 20, or you're not.
Or give them the option. Maybe they say, I've sent it in, I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
Yeah, you-
They'll
I
just
think you
have
give
to
them
pay
the
it on
option.
the
I think you
tail
give
end.
them the option.
'Cause
Yeah, I'm with
I
Miles.
think you give them the option. I think that February sales tax was of a normal
Yeah.
looking month. I mean, I can tell you from having been in the restaurant industry years ago that January, February are normally slow months anyway. It's when you get into March and April where restaurants finally pick back up after the holiday, slump of credit card bills and everything else. So I would appreciate the option, like the mayor said, and Mr. Soslowski.
I'm good with the option.
So when you guys say option, you mean the option of paying or the option of us rebating if they apply? Because that's a
Yes.
distinction.
I'd say the option if they apply and they desire it back.
Yeah, if they want the rebate after reading this new rule,
Okay.
they
If
should
that
be
would
given
help
the
their
option
bottom
to.
line, still due by the end of the year.
Yeah, they still owe it.
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
as long as they're clear as to what that means for them. It means
Okay.
another payment
They
that
still
we'll have to
owe
come
it,
up
they
with.
still
That's
owe
another
it by the
point
end of the
time.
year. But if it
Okay,
would
yeah,
help their
we could-
cash
We
flow,
could certainly
yeah.
build that in, so then it would be basically February collections, March, April, May, and June. So now that's 5 months of deferral, and then July would kick back in. Is the board still comfortable with that? Okay, we'll do the draft. I'm looking at Mr. McCarger here, thinking that we'll try to get a draft out to you tomorrow.
By 2:39.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
I'm going to write that down.
Well,
Now, a minute later.
so we'll try to get, and then is the board available to meet, like, I'm gonna say maybe Thursday afternoon, have a special meeting? Just the idea of doing like a 4 PM, kind of a late afternoon, where everybody zooms in. We have the special meeting, the board considers that ordinance. Does that work for everybody?
The 26th? Yes. Works for me.
Okay, fantastic. And then, so after tonight's ordinance and you can vote remotely, we're going to highly encourage the board to zoom in and not come in any longer. I think it would make sense to have the mayor come in, because I think to chair the meetings and to call everybody, it'll be much easier to have her do that if she has
If I
access to
have
the
my
internet.
helper, my good helper did that, yes.
But other than that, I'm going to respectfully request that everybody else stays at home and zooms in. So if you have any questions with that technology or your ability to do that, please let us know, because we need to make sure you're successful and you know what the heck you're doing with that. And we can talk to you more about how that will work. But again, I think until we're through with the social distancing, that we should really lead by example and zoom in.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, details will come. Anticipate a couple test runs as well. We do have till Thursday, so.
Okay.
Christie?
Yes, Ken.
I wanted to ask Stacy, for our businesses that are feeling confused about where to go for resources, I was looking at our website. Under economic development, we have a small business resource guide, and like page 28 or something has the number for SBA. Are there other resources that we could?
Go to the COVID site.
It's on the COVID site. There's
The
a,
COVID
yeah,
site,
so the
okay.
COVID
So
site
that's what-
actually
if someone
has,
asked tonight, we would tell them to go to the COVID site.
yeah, because
on our
there's
website.
our
On the
master,
left-hand side, there's very
Okay.
specific business
there's our business
assistance.
list of the businesses that are open at bars and restaurant. There's our
Couldn't find that,
resource,
so, okay, I'll look for it.
there's the
That's it.
SBA link, there's the
Okay.
workforce link, there's some other stuff.
Nice job on that.
Yeah.
Hey,
That's-
Jess, do you want to set a time for the dry run or for the practice?
I'll give you a call.
Oh, okay.
And we'll figure it from there.
So,
Thank you, sir.
Okay, you got what you need? It's going to take about 5 minutes to transition over before we'll be ready to move into the actual town board meeting. So give them 5 minutes to get everything set up and we'll
Thank
come
you,
back.
Madam Mayor and town board members. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.